Doyle is in the studio. She's the author of Manage Your Financial Life. And, well, she's been here before. Nancy, thanks for coming back. Nice to see you.
Well, thanks for having me. Glad to be back.
And so, I've got a couple of, well, I don't have millennials. I think my kids are younger than millennials maybe. But I love talking about them, about, how they can how they're definable, what they like, what they don't like. And what they need right now probably is a path to start saving money. I think the biggest lesson anyone can learn or take heed of is to start early and let things add up, right? So if a millennial comes to you and says, I want $1 million, what do you tell them?
Well, I think there are three important things to keep in mind. First of all, you've got to start investing early, and you have to be consistent, meaning you have to save and invest every year. Second, you have to be disciplined. Once you invest that money, you can't touch it.
Right.
And then the last point is, as you plan, it's really important to use realistic and reasonable assumptions in terms of what you're going to earn on your money every year.
Well, we'll get to that because I think that applies. Well, it all really applies
to all
to
of us.
everybody.
Absolutely.
But let's start with starting early, because I was lucky in that I worked at a place where right away we had a 401k plan, and I could kick that off right away. A lot of younger workers aren't there in the beginning, and so I would imagine it's kind of tougher for them to set aside money on their own.
Well, actually, the youngest millennials, say, for example, someone who's, 19, 20, or even those at 22 just starting out in the workforce, if you assume, say, a 6% return after fees, and we can talk about returns in a minute, but if you put away $4,500 a year for 45 years, so as long as you're in the workforce, you will have $1 million at the end of that time. And it's the power of compounding. It's the consistency and the discipline.
So $4,500 a year when
for 45 years will get you to $1 million. And basically, 20% of that million is your contributions, and 80% is the power of compounding investment returns.
So when of that $1 million, only $200,000 is yours.
Absolutely.
Nancy, that's magic.
Well, it is, and people talk about the magic of compounding. Now, say you're an older millennial and you've got only 30 years to retirement, maybe 36 or so. You have to put away $12,000 a year.
Wow.
But you will get to that $1 million. And for that example, it's a little more than a third is your contributions. The rest is compounding. So it really is important.
Okay, so I'm going to say something that seems counterintuitive, maybe, especially if you're young. But in many ways, even though you're making less money, I almost, and you're facing student loan bills or all of these things, I almost think it's easier to save when you're younger than it is when you're older.
Yes, and I talk about this in the book, Manage Your Financial Life, because when you're younger, just starting out, you don't have a mortgage, you probably don't have kids, you may have a student loan payment, which many kids do. And there's a formula that a lot of financial planners use where it's the 50-30-20 rule, and of your take-home pay, 50% goes for the essentials: mortgage, rent, insurance, food. 20% should go towards saving or paying down debt, like student loans.
Right.
And if you stick to that, that's also discipline. That will keep you on track to achieve your retirement goals.
The nice thing about that, too, because really this worked for me, because I was able to save early, I saw success.
Exactly.
And if you see success, then it's sort of, it breeds success and it makes you want to keep doing it.
It does. But I think as people plan, coming back to the point I made earlier about investment returns, some of those retirement calculators you look at.
Yeah, I just plug in 10%.
Well,
I plan on 10%.
But here's the thing. If you go back over 40 years, and if you had invested in a balanced portfolio, which is 60% stocks, 40% bonds, you would have earned 10% over that 40-year period. If you were all in stocks, it would be 11%. But if you look at the past 20 years, and I talk about this in the book, those returns would be, low sevens to mid to high sevens, depending on how you invest. The past 10 years, it's even lower. It's under 7%. So I think you have to, people often talk about that 40-year, 10% return. I think the world is different now. And I think using an assumption of 6% after fees is more reasonable.
And you know what? Also, if you're starting to save only by what your assumptions are, then you're coasting a little bit. And why coast?
Well, and some of these retirement calculators I've seen, they will start at a 7% return or 8%. I've also heard people talk about using higher assumptions. And the higher assumption you use for rate of return, the more likely you are to miss your goal.
Right.
So it's important to be
interesting.
prudent. It is important to be prudent.
Nancy Doyle, the name of the book, Manage Your Financial Life. It's great to see you again.
Great to see you again, Steve.